Special meeting of the City of Morgantown Board of Zoning Appeals. Please turn off all cell phones or other devices that may disrupt these proceedings. It is the duty of this board to consider requests for relief from the requirements of the city's zoning regulations, to consider conditional use permit requests, and to hear administrative appeals. The board conducts business in the following order: review, amend, and approve meetings of a previous meeting, move on to unfinished business, take up new business, and then conclude with announcements from staff. Each request is heard in the order that it appears on the agenda. For each conditional use and variance request, the following is done. I will introduce the agenda item from the Planning Division, and the Planning Division will present its staff report, which may or may not offer recommendation. The applicant agent will be asked to present their justification for their request, which may include questions by members of the board. We will then open a public hearing to hear testimony in support of or in opposition to the request. Rules regarding public testimony are as follows. Anyone wishing to testify during the public hearing may do so once recognized by me, or may, in lieu of oral testimony, submit written testimony to the chair. All recognized speakers must approach the podium, state their name and address for the record, and speak clearly into the microphone. All comments must be addressed to the board, should be relevant to the application, and may not be of a personal nature or personal attacks. All speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. If members of the board have any questions of the speaker, that time will not be counted toward her 5 minutes. If there's a large number of speakers, including many who are part of groups or organizations, we may, to avoid repetitive comments, elect to ask for a representative to speak on behalf of the group or organization. Speakers are notified that irrelevant comments or comments of a personal nature or personal attacks may result in the speaker forfeiting his/her opportunity to participate in the public hearing. We may elect to recognize the applicant agent at the end of the public hearing to provide rebuttal or additional comments, which will be limited to an additional 5 minutes. If members of the board have any questions of the applicant agent, that time will not be counted toward the total 5 minutes. After all testimony is heard, I will declare the public hearing closed, and no further public comment will be permitted. Uncivil, unruly, and/or disruptive behavior at any time during the meeting this meeting is prohibited and will result in removal from this public meeting. State law requires that the board consider findings of fact for each conditional use and variance request. The request cannot be granted unless a majority of the quorum present finds in the positive of all of the findings of fact. The board may elect to continue the hearing to another date if it needs additional information or clarification. Applicants and requesting parties will be notified in writing by the Planning Division of the board's findings and conclusions. Regardless of whether a request is approved or denied, decisions of the board can be appealed to the Circuit Court of Montague County within 30 days upon receipt of the written notification from planning. Any work relating to decisions rendered by this board during this 30-day period is at the sole financial risk of the applicant. Thank you for your consideration and respect for these proceedings and the opinions of all meeting participants. All right, we've called to order. I'm going to call the roll. Mr. Plyler?
Here.
Mr. Schumlicher? Here. Ms. Cook?
Here.
Mr. Benison is present. We do have a quorum. Another committee member is absent, but we still have the quorum, so we can proceed. We do have meeting minutes from our regular May 29th, 2024 meeting to review. Any comments, questions, objections, or can we?
I move that we accept the meeting minutes from May 29th.
And I second that motion by Ms. Cook to accept meeting minutes from May 29, 2024, regular meeting. How do we vote?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting minutes from said meeting, so accepted into the record. So our sole case this evening is under new business, variance 24-125 Bocce LLC 48 Donnelly Street, request by, and am I, to the petitioner's representative, is that the correct pronunciation, just to? Bocce, is that correct? Okay.
Good.
Good. Okay, request by Miss Crystal Miller with City Neon, Inc., on behalf of Bocce LLC for variance relief from Article 1369 of the city's Planning and Zoning Code regarding signage standards for a wall sign at 48 Donnelly Street, City Tax District 9 in the First Ward, Tax Map 28, Parcel 17 in the B4 General Business District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The applicant seeks to install a new flag mounted wall sign at 48 Donnelly, as you mentioned. The sign was 23.3 square feet. The applicant desires to install the wall sign on behalf of Lodge LLC to make the new restaurant action on the first floor more visible to members and pedestrians utilizing Donald Boulevard. The picture on the screen and in your packet shows the location of the subject site, parcel 17. And while the new restaurant has direct access to the Caperton Rail Trail and Donnelly Street, the establishment has approximately 48 linear feet of building frontage, and this is shown in the pictures coming up on the screen. So the picture on the left is from Google Street View from the Caperton Rail Trail, and the restaurant encompasses, or the footprint encompasses the whole side of that building. But the side that faces the public street is on Donnelly, and that's this area here. So that's where the 48 feet of building frontage comes from. In terms of looking, here's the proposal for the signage and how, in terms of it would be displayed on the building. It'd be located between floors 2 and 3, and with the applicant just provided an updated rendering of what the actual face of the acrylic signage would be. So that's in front of you now. It obviously has changed from what was provided in your packet. Giving the requirements for wall signage and the linear building frontage, the maximum wall sign permitted is 19.2 square feet. The applicant's proposed signage is 23.3, so the applicant is requesting a 4.1 square foot variance for the max wall signage area. In addition, the applicant is requesting variance relief regarding the lighting standards in 136908, as well as the material of the sign to be installed. And let's see, and that will conclude staff's report.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Do we have a representative?
Yes.
Ms. Miller.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
So I am here on behalf of 48 Donnelly Restaurant, located at 48 Donnelly Street in the Marina Tower Bocce building, owned by Bocce. And this particular building, when you face it from Don Knotts Boulevard, there is a slope that goes downward. So to combat that, we are requesting that, it go above the floor of the actual restaurant in between floors 2 and 3 for visibility. We're asking for increased sign size allowance, so that it can be legible and readable from the road, maybe. Because we're dealing with like a 275-foot setback from Don Knotts Boulevard, which is quite substantial. And then their predominant entrance is on the rail trail, so they do get a lot of rail trail traffic. But with the parking situation being in front of the building, then there's also the parking garage, getting the better visibility and wayfinding that to get the patrons to the actual building. This particular sign is a cabinet sign, but it's different from the typical acrylic face. It is what we call a push-through acrylic sign. So it is an aluminum box that has been routed to the shape of the letters, and then the letters themselves will be acrylic that pushes through the aluminum face.
Right.
So the only lighting would be the actual letters. So
Right.
it's going to have a soft glow to it. It's not going to be a harsh lighting situation.
So are the lighting elements around the periphery of the cabinet?
They're on the inside of the cabinet, so behind the acrylic that would push through the,
Oh, right.
So essentially, the sign is backlit.
yes, it would
In
be,
two
yes.
directionally. Yeah, all right.
And then we have proposed that it is mounted perpendicular to the building because there are houses across the street. I'm not sure if they are residential or business. But in an effort to not have a sign directly face those properties, we're
Right.
having it mounted perpendicular, and then that gives better visibility also to Don Knotts and the rail trail.
Now, is it, just given the setback to University, 275 or so feet, is it mounted to that facade, like at the midpoint, or is it weighted, so to speak?
Is
to-
actually, I'm sorry,
the
towards the
university.
corner of Don Knotts.
So
like
closer to
the
Don
closest
Knotts, I'm
corner.
sorry, not
Yes.
University, Don Knotts, thank you.
Well, I think I referenced university in the paperwork, so, yes. So it is right there it is on the Donley Street side,
Right.
but the furthest you can get towards Don
Don
Knotts.
Knotts, that makes sense.
My question is, why couldn't have they posted on the front of the building?
The front of the building has how do I phrase this? Premier tenants, so they
Oh.
have like a full floor or sometimes 2 floors.
Okay.
So they've got premium signage
Okay.
display in the restaurant because it only takes up half of 1 floor.
Okay.
Was only allowed
And
so
it's
much by the
illuminated,
property
too.
owner.
Okay,
And all the signage currently on the building is illuminated. There's 3 signs and they're all illuminated channel letter sets.
so they're similar.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, this building has been through many variances.
I got you. One thing I would like is, I know you used to put them where it show it on the building, that would be nice.
I think there might be one, it's just the old design, which they updated it because the legibility of Donley.
Okay,
So they have updated the script. It's still the same wording, but to try to increase visibility, to make
Okay.
it more readable.
okay.
Yeah, it's a sharp design.
Mhm.
Is the illumination, will it be on a timer? Just out of
I'm
curiosity.
Pretty sure that this building has an energy management system, which means all the electrical components are on timers. So every sign will come on at the same time, and they will all shut off on the same time, just as the exterior lighting of the building will as well.
Right.
That's good to know.
That's in line with just general, especially for the restaurant hours of operation, so it'll probably, 1 AM?
I think
Or-
like weekday hours are 9 PM, and I'm not sure exactly what their weekend
starting
hours are.
curiosity.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Nope.
I do have 2 questions. They're geared mostly at the statements of fact. You made mention, or mentioned in here was that let me find specifically which one. Basically, the statement was that there are no ill effects. There were no ill effects from the other signs that had been done previously. How do we know that?
There have been, maybe that should be worded, there have been no reported effects. That might be the proper wording of
Reported
that.
negative? Yeah. okay.
Yes.
That I can believe.
That would most likely, that would probably be the better wording.
Okay.
We can change the.
Yeah.
verbiage.
Yeah.
I think
if
we
you
should have
change it
changed
to
that.
Okay.
I can get behind that statement.
Okay.
And I believe it to be true.
And also, Ms. Miller did note that this property has been, in terms of variances granted, we have that timeline
Correct.
during which there's opportunity to evaluate
Yeah.
adverse in terms of the atmospherics with regard to the lighting.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think we should put that in the verbiage, no reported
Yeah.
Adverse effect.
If I may, Mr. President, Mr. Blair, is that in the first finding of fact, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure where he's at
Yeah,
either.
which, is that on
Okay,
24?
it's on page 24. It's the very top.
Okay,
Oh,
okay, so these signs have had
No
no ill
reported ill
effects.
effects.
No
So
put that in
have
right
had
there.
no reported ill effects or no reported negative?
yeah, no reported negative.
Negative?
Yeah, negative.
We could even add no reported or documented
Yeah.
negative effects to give it even more specificity.
Got it.
Reported?
Or documented negative effects.
Then my other question is about the third one, on page 24. The question is, the variance will eliminate unnecessary hardship and permit a reasonable use of the land. And the sign that you're proposing, the rationale is to provide wayfinding. Does that sign provide, is your claim that it's just wayfinding in general or adequate wayfinding? And does that sign provide adequate wayfinding
From both Don Knotts
Right.
and the rail trail.
It
Yeah.
would definitely be adequate from the rail trail.
Correct.
Don Knotts, it may be on the smaller side of, or inadequate
Right.
for visibility from Don Knotts.
They didn't have much of a choice.
Is it,
Yeah.
do you have the option of like setting a smallish like monument?
The space that they are working with would be you can see there's a planter-like area in between the building and the sidewalk, and that's about 5 to 6 feet. But then once you deal with the slope of Donley coming off of Don Knotts, I'm not sure how visible
That only-
that would actually be.
Yeah.
If we're, again, I get hung up on words sometimes to a fault. I think what is being proposed is fine, but it's sort of the statement that this will provide wayfinding. If it's a dual purpose, I think the reality is the sign would need to be way bigger, which is outside of your control. So perhaps a better way to phrase that would be, it will improve wayfinding.
Yeah.
And just,
Add it, we're good.
yeah.
So the restaurant will provide, or the restaurant can provide improved wayfinding, or?
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's go with provide improved finding, rather than changing provide to improve,
Because she had to work with what she had, I mean,
right?
Yeah.
Because in terms of citing a monument sign right there, I'm assuming that like the adjacent parking is open to this tenant, but I mean, using that planter space doesn't really, the parking's already there, so it's not really gonna heighten wayfinding for patrons making use of the parking that's right there. It's like you say, it's the Don Knotts approach, and there, we really can't address
yeah, the
that here.
best they can.
And then there's also the constraints of the code in which any monument sign would be limited to 6 foot in height, so that would,
And on Don Knotts, that's, you're already,
Kind of out.
yeah.
Kind of out.
all right, well,
Okay,
any other
Anything
questions?
else?
Do you have any questions?
okay.
No? No?
Thank
Well,
you.
then-
Well, one more, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I kind of wanted, you're good. I was
Okay.
going to just move. Open the public hearing.
Yeah, let's go ahead and open the public hearing unless, Mr. Yeager, did you have anything to add?
No, sir.
No?
Thank you for the
All right.
clarification earlier.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and we noted the proposed changes to the findings of fact referenced on page 24 of the meeting packet, which we'll address later. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in support of or in opposition to this case, VAR 24-125, now is your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Go ahead.
On that, I'd like to move that we accept the findings of fact as amended in the packet.
All right. I just want to note, as per custom, planning does not have recommendations because this is a signage case. Just want to note that.
There's no recommendation,
And
but,
no conditions.
well, I do have,
Oh.
I do have
Speak
two.
to that.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Let's
weren't in your
address that
packet,
first.
so, and the applicant and I have discussed this, but
Let's go ahead and do that first.
Yeah.
staff recommendation, obviously, it's customary that the sign variance petitions, that staff doesn't provide recommendation. But if the Board of Zoning Appeals approves the variance request, that it be conditional on the following: that staff and the applicant verify that the sign will not protrude into the public right-of-way on Donnelly Street, and that staff verifies that the proposed new signage plan submitted to today at this meeting is in keeping with the original measurements that were originally provided. A quick overview, looks like it is, but I just want to verify.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
So we will reference those
In
conditions.
the variance, yeah.
And maybe, I don't, for the record, I don't see those conditions referenced in the packet.
No, he said they weren't.
Those are just brought to your
Okay.
attention now. They're not in your packet.
Can we, just in terms of legal record, can that text be added?
They will be recorded in the minutes.
All right,
Yep.
good, perfect.
Okay.
Just because it's part of the legal
Absolutely.
record.
I do
So-
have a question about one of those statements. You use the word, or words, "does not protrude into the public right of way." Does that mean, I mean, I know it's up on the second, third floor, so
Right.
I think it's rather a moot point. But when a statement like that is made, is there any allowance? Like, is that
Come off the building. Is
Yeah,
it?
I want to go back and verify that. And if it would protrude into the right of way, we may need to reevaluate this again.
Okay.
But that's just being out of abundance of caution.
Yeah.
It looks like it's outside the right of way and on private property, but I want to make sure.
Okay.
I gotcha.
And it doesn't, I mean, it looks like it might extend over the pedestrian right of way, but not the
Roadway.
roadway, which would be more of a concern for me in terms of emergency.
From the city's standpoint, the only right of way that really matters is the city's property, correct?
It's the public right of way.
Yeah.
So on the aerial maps, it's kind of difficult sometimes to judge where
Yeah.
they are. Looking at this particular site, it looks like where the sidewalk might be, where the public right of way ends, but just want to verify.
Sure.
If your client had to affix that directly to the building, would that be problematic from, like, the electrical?
The electrical actually runs through, so the mounting brackets, I think the artwork does show so the bracket that attaches to the wall, there's 4 tubes there,
Right?
and in those tubes, there will be electrical. There'll be
Right,
one
yeah.
electrical that punches through
Sure.
the actual wall of the building.
But if those channels weren't, that's not going to adversely affect, like, the performance of the electrical components. If if the cabinet's right on the facade, that's not problematic, right?
No, because it would be mounted differently. The bracket system would be different for that.
Uh-huh.
It wouldn't change the electrical
All right,
on that.
that's fine. Like, if whatever it turns out to be, if it's,
Yeah, and it looks
like, it looks like it's literally 4.5 inches off the facade. Like, if you had to give up those 4.5 inches in terms of the right-of-way, that wouldn't be problematic.
The leg extensions from the wall
It-
are 4.5. If you had to get rid of
It looks like
those-
it's even less than,
Right.
it's about, yeah, it's less than 6 inches. But just to try to anticipate, so that if you had to give up the 4.5 inches,
Would it matter?
In terms
Would it
of
matter?
yeah, would that be problematic for your client? Just trying to
I
anticipate
don't believe
that.
that would be problematic. We would just have to have a different mounting system instead of having.
Not that we're
brackets.
not gonna
Yeah.
grant your variance, but just
Yeah.
try to anticipate for your client if that is an issue. Just
Based on
pointing
what-
that out.
Based on what is being described, the electrical is likely going through one of these extension legs,
Right,
and the location of that electric cable coming out of the brick
right,
wouldn't change.
right.
So the cable, it's the electrical connection would, for all intents and purposes, remain the same.
Right,
Okay.
okay, that's fine. Just pointing, all right. So, all right, thank you. And so we're noting those conditions, which will be
When we get to
added
the
to the
variance.
minutes. Do we have any additional discussion or questions or anything at this point before we move to Ms. Cook's
Findings of
motion?
fact, right? All right.
Go ahead.
So I just say that, I move that we accept the findings of fact again, as stated in the packet, with the, as amended.
Mhm. With the conditions referenced by Mr. Yeager.
Well, that goes
that's
to
in
the
the second.
variance. It's in the variance.
Okay,
This is
okay.
just, yeah.
Okay, yeah, the findings of fact, okay. So I second that motion to accept the findings of fact that we did propose some changes, slight changes to the verbiage referenced on page 24 of the meeting packet. So we have a motion to accept the findings of fact, seconded by me. How do we vote?
Aye.
Aye. So we've accepted the findings of fact. Do we have a motion to grant the variance for this case, VR 24-125?
Yeah. I move that we grant the variance with the additional conditions as stated by Ricky Yeager.
Thank you. And I will second that motion as proposed by Ms. Cook. How do we vote on this motion to grant variance?
Aye.
Aye. So we have, Ms. Miller, we have granted your client's request for variance for this case, VR 24-125. You will receive written notification generally within 10 business days from planning. Just keep in mind, as you are well aware, within that 30-day appeals period, it can be appealed to the Circuit Court of Monongalia County, and any work done by you or your client in that 30-day period is done at your client's sole financial risk. Thanks once again for coming down this evening.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have any announcements
No, sir.
from staff? All right. So do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting for July 17th, 2024?
I move
I
that we,
move.
go ahead. Oh, you move, I'll say.
And this meeting is so adjourned. Thank you.